taking time of your afternoon to make it here, so thank you very much for that. The topic of today's conversation, of course, as I said, is design for Six Sigma and Lean Startup. Okay, so we have really a number of terms and variables, right? We have the folks talk about all the time. We have Lean Six Sigma, we have the existing process, we have design for Six Sigma. Then we have things like cost reduction, Lean Startup, revenue improvement. Then we have some things, so if you know of even Lean Six Sigma, we have some things that maybe you haven't necessarily heard of, like IDOL, DMAIC, DMADB, DMADOL, all best practice tools, regardless of what your level of familiarity is, you have all these terms, and oftentimes it can be a little bit confusing. You may have heard of things like continuous improvement, but how do all of these things relate? Well, let's start with Lean Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma is, first of all, it's an approach. It's customer-centric. Really, Lean Six Sigma is all based on the customer. That may be a surprise to some, because some folks might think of Lean Six Sigma as like a cost-cutting or cost-saving mechanism, but it's not really. The heart of Lean Six Sigma is the customer, and getting the voice of the customer is the heart of everything that Lean Six Sigma is all about. Lean Six Sigma has an approach, and that is primarily the DMAIC approach. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with what that means, it's an approach for optimizing an existing process, and the key word here is existing. Through a Lean Six Sigma approach, what you're really doing is you're identifying and you're solving bottlenecks to a problem. These are tough problems, problems that haven't been able to reach a resolution through the normal course of business. And it's all based on the scientific method. So if you understand this method, there is a high probability that if you execute this method appropriately, then you're going to solve the problem and you're going to be able to put together a solution that works. It's all designed to, at the end of the day, optimize resources, reduce costs, and then also maximize revenues. And it's important that we really focus on all three of these things because, as I've said before, many folks feel as if Lean Six Sigma is a cost reduction exercise, but it really is all three of these things. If you're optimizing revenues, you're going to accomplish all three. Okay, so design for Six Sigma. You'll notice by the diagram that it fits inside of Lean Six Sigma. So I mentioned before the Lean Six Sigma approach is about, it's customer-centric. I said it is based on DMAIC and existing process. And then I said it's to identify and solve bottlenecks. Okay, fine. And so I said it's based on the scientific method. Well, what is design for Six Sigma? Now that we have Lean Six Sigma, how does design for Six Sigma relate? Well, design for Six Sigma is to optimize a new process. And what's important about that is that a new process is a new product or a new process, something that hasn't existed before. There are three, unlike the Lean Six Sigma, which has DMAIC as the predominant approach, design for Six Sigma actually has three approaches. There's DMADOL, which is, and by the way, DMAIC stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control. That's DMAIC. Well, design for Six Sigma actually is three things. It has three different variables, three different approaches. DMADB is define, measure, analyze, design, and then verify or validate. DMADOL is the same thing, but then there's this thing that we call design of experiments. Months of actual work, but you're basically designing experiments so that you can really, really, truly optimize something. And then IDOL stands for identify, define, develop, then optimize and verify. What's really important here is that design for Six Sigma has three different ways of accomplishing its objective, whereas Lean Six Sigma has one. But design for Six Sigma is a subset of Lean Six Sigma. All three of these things, by the way, produce innovation. So if you're looking for how does Lean Six Sigma produce innovation, once you start getting into the design for Six Sigma realm, you are talking about how do we effectively introduce and design and bring to market innovation that is powerful, that has a high degree of value because it's based on what the customer is identifying as value. So then we have Lean Startup. So as I said, for design for Six Sigma, I said that was for optimizing a new process or a new product. Lean start, and of course we have three methods of that: DMAD-E, DMAD-OFF, and IDOF. And then the question is, what I want to get into is, why would someone necessarily want to employ design for Six Sigma? Well, there's really three reasons. Reason number one, let's say you've gone through a Lean Six Sigma approach, you've redesigned a process that was existing, and you say, you know, we've got this process we've done well, but we really, the performance is really, it's just poor. So we really can't, like, we need a new process. We need a new way of going about it. Well, if you need a new way of going about executing a process, you would want to employ design for Six Sigma. The other method, or the other reason why you want to perhaps use a design for Six Sigma is because maybe you said, okay, look, we've revamped this process, and we just can't get it beyond a certain level. We can get it maybe at 4.5 sigma. And by the way, that's just a way of saying that the number of defects are, let's say, 100,000 out of a million, maybe 50,000 out of a million. Well, that kind of performance may be okay in some industries, but in some industries that could be problematic. So you say, okay, well, we need to get this at, 3.4 defects per million, which is Six Sigma, and so we need an approach like either DMAD-OFF, DMAD-E, or IDOF. That's the second reason that you might want to employ this. And the third reason is, like I said before, a new product or a new service. Well, guess what? That's where Lean Startup comes into the picture. Lean Startup is developing a new product. And you'll notice that I highlighted this red because it really encapsulates quite nicely the relationship between Lean Startup and design for Six Sigma. Yes, I said that it captures it graphically here, but it's really letting you know and alerting you to the idea that Lean Startup is a full subset of design for Six Sigma. And that's the real, if you take away anything from this, hopefully you'll understand the relationship there. Lean Startup develops a new product, it develops a new service, and that's what we're trying to do. So, design for Six Sigma, the key points I want to make sure that I communicate is, number one, Lean Six Sigma is for an existing process. Design for Six Sigma is for new product or a new service. Lean Six Sigma and Lean Startup are both lean. And Lean Startup actually is designed for Six Sigma. And before I move on, are there any questions with that? Because I hope that I was able to communicate that effectively. Are there any questions there? So, how does design for Six Sigma improve revenues? Well, there's two approaches, and Lean Six Sigma is actually two different things, or it's two things that complement each other pretty well. From a lean perspective, you're going to optimize production process, you're going to complete tasks in a minimal amount of time, and then you'll minimize inappropriate product, and you'll maximize the yield from all of your activities. So that's the lean part of it. The Six Sigma part of it is discovering customer value. Hugely important. Maximizing that value, finding out the things that are giving the customer the greatest amount of value, and actually trying to minimize those things that are either non-value added or actually are turn-offs to the customer. And then finally, you're going to maximize the customer experience as a process, and then you're going to, of course, solve customer problems. What I wanted to do now is I wanted to kind of go over a few case studies that will make this real for you. So let's talk about Amazon. Everyone in here, I would hope, is familiar with Amazon. Well, what is Amazon? They're online shopping. There was a day, if you think back, where we all had to drive to the store. Remember those days we had to drive to the store? And that was a problem, because there'd be roads, there'd be traffic. I mean, think about that for a second. Traffic, roads, driving a distance. There were long lines at the checkout. I'm hoping, it looks like the crowd can all appreciate that this was the way that it used to be. There was competition between other consumers, especially on things like Thanksgiving. There were stories about how people would fight for things. There was finding the best deal was a problem. Companies price, and you had to go to various stores in order to get the best pricing. You had to actually get comparative information, and that was very, very time-consuming. Remember those days? I do. Then and let's face it, you had to shop with the kids. A lot of people here, not everyone here, but if you think about it, a lot of shopping is done with moms. Well, guess what? Mommy, can I have this? Mommy, can I have that? Even for some of us guys, you've been in the store and your kids are saying they want something, that's a problem. Because what's going to happen? You're either going to spend more money than you wanted to, or you're going to have to negotiate. And I think we've all probably seen the store tantrums. So guess what? Amazon was able to kind of focus. Now, did they go out and say, hey, we want to have a Lean Six Sigma approach? Maybe not. But the bottom line was what they were able to do was they were able to focus all the positive things and really think about all the value that they could create. And they stripped away all of the negative things. So you don't have roads, you don't have traffic. You don't have long lines at the checkout. You don't have to do things like spend more than you wanted to because someone's asking you, unless they're over your shoulder watching you online. But you don't have to do that. That's what a Lean Six Sigma approach looks like. It's stripping away all the things that the customer doesn't want and giving them more of the things that they do want. And it's all based on empirical data. So this is one case study. Another case study might be Netflix. There used to be a day, Netflix is movie rental. Well, there used to be a day where there was a Friday night or a Saturday night movie grab, right? Where and I hope that there are people in this room that remember these days. But you get off of work on a Friday, you race to the video store trying to get the movie that you're looking to try to get, and that's a problem because guess what? Everyone else is doing it. It's a high volume period of time, and you have limited time to search because guess what? You may want to do other things than just watch the movie. There was a desire to do more than watch the movie, and then the other thing is there was a competition for new releases. If you remember, when the new releases would come out, there might only be like 20 videos. So you're trying to get to the video, and you're hoping that there are enough of them there so that you can get this video that you want to watch. Well, you had to drive to the nearest location in order to do that. And then you also had to, sometimes those releases were unavailable. And what would you do? You settle for another movie. I'm sure that there are people that remember those days. Sometimes the movie itself had issues. Sometimes the movie was, you'd open it up and that's not the movie I thought was going to be in here. Sometimes the movie was scratched. It was damaged. Sometimes it wasn't rewound. And when you rewound it, sometimes it broke. Those were issues that we used to have to deal with. And of course, the worst part of it all was after you watched the movie the next day, what you have to do? You got to drive back to the movie rental store because if you didn't, you were going to get fined. So what does Netflix do? Well, they took all of the negative parts of this, and they said, you know what, we're going to do away with that, and you're not going to have to deal with this. And by the way, we're going to give you all the movies that you need for the most part. You're not going to have to deal with high volume traffic because it's you and Netflix. You're not going to necessarily have limited time to search. You're going to be able to take as much time as you need to. You're not going to have to worry or think about a movie with issues or returning the video. Again, did they go out and say that they wanted to do a Lean Six Sigma approach? Probably not. But what they did was they focused all of their attention on delivering the highest amount of value, and they stripped away all of the things that were inconvenient. These things, by the way, don't just happen by happenstance. These things happen because there's thought, meticulous thought, as to what is going to deliver the highest amount of value and what's going to really, and how do we solve the problem for the consumer. Case study number 3 is Apple. Apple, I look at Apple and I think of Apple as a bundled experience. I mean, there are people that I'm sure think of Apple as other things, computers and all those things, but what they really are is they really are a bundled experience. You used to have to buy a phone, you used to have to buy an answering machine, and if you weren't home, you hoped that someone would leave a message. You hope that the woman or the man of your dreams would call again. I know I remember those days, and probably everyone in this room might remember those days as well. You either bought a Sony Walkman or a boombox or an iPod. I'm sure we can all remember the days where those big guys would carry those huge boomboxes on their shoulder. And I know I started working out just so I could actually carry one of those things. Well, fortunately I don't have to, but then there used to be a day you have to have a phone. So there's a cell phone, then there's an iPod, and then there's or a Walkman, and all these things you used to have to carry. Well, guess what? You don't have to do that anymore. You used to have to go to the record store to purchase a song. You used to have to purchase the entire album even if you wanted just one song. I hope that everyone can remember those days because I know I do. And sometimes those records would get lost, damaged, or stolen. And on top of that, you could only play records at home. So if you had a record, and you had the album, you can play that in your record player at home, but nobody had a record player in their car, so you had to get the CD or the tape and play it in your car. So you actually had to get two things just to play it. And then the other thing, let me go back for a second. The other thing that you had to do was, if you wanted one song, you had to buy the whole album. That, for me, was frustrating. It was frustrating. I don't know about you, but this idea that I can just buy the song that I like, that's huge. So what did Apple do? They said, you know what? We're going to do away with this whole thing where you have to carry an iPod, where you have to carry your cell phone, where you have to carry a day planner. They combined all of these things into a bundled experience. They maximized all of the value in terms of what consumers really wanted, and maybe some things that they even didn't know or understand that they wanted. They delivered all of that in a high-value proposition, and they stripped out all of the things that we hated. So you don't have to just buy the whole album if you just want one song. You don't have to buy one record for your home and then a tape for your car. You can actually do all of these things in one product, one seamless experience. Now, the case study takeaways are that to understand the customer really is to understand value. Centering your business around maximizing value is the way to go, because that's what all those companies were able to do, and they maximize the customer experience. That includes products, and it also includes the delivery of those products. It includes utilizing data to actually advance the customer experience. And that's really important, because I think a lot of times what's missed is the data collection efforts that happen below the current that you may not be familiar with that actually lead to these kinds of products and services. And then finally, translating that customer data into continuous innovation. Now, understanding customer value. What does that mean? What does it mean when we say understanding customer value? And how does design for Six Sigma play into that? Well, there's an emphasis on obtaining customer information. I've said it before, and market data, and achieving that and really obtaining all of this information up front before you actually design or produce anything. This would be the D portion of DMADOF, or DMADI, and it's the I portion of IDOF, identify. So again, just to recap, DMADI, is define, measure, analyze, design, and verify or validate. And this is the same thing: define, measure, analyze, define, develop, optimize, and verify. And optimize, of course, as I said before, that's really designing experiments to make sure that you're optimizing your product or service. Understanding customer value from a design for Six Sigma perspective, what that means is you're taking the best practice approach on obtaining customer data. And what you're doing is you're trying to utilize Lean Six Sigma tools. You're going to use things like the Q analysis. You're going to use things like TRIZ, which is a way of having breakthrough engineering. You're going to use things like quality function deployment, which actually quantifies and prioritizes what's important to the customer and how, as a company, we deliver that service or product. And then you're also going to use things like the critical to quality tree in terms of understanding what's really important to the customer. You're going to use things like critical to satisfaction. These are going to be points that are important to a customer in a process. They're the most important things that the customer perceives as quality. And then also you're going to use things like the prioritization matrix, which you can use that from as low as at a consumer level. You can use a prioritization matrix for mergers and acquisitions. So you're going to use these tools to deliver and maximize customer value. And FRACS, which is failure reporting, analysis, and failure reporting, analysis, and corrective action system. And so what you're doing here is you're going to use this type of tool to ask yourself questions like, what could go wrong with this product or service? How do we avoid having a catastrophic launch or a catastrophic failure with our product or service? You start in terms of uncovering value for Lean Six Sigma and for Design for Six Sigma. What you're doing is the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at what are our likely satisfiers. Satisfiers are needs that are known to and voiced by the customer. Then you're going to look and you're going to ask questions like, okay, what are our likely dissatisfiers? These are going to be things that, these are going to be needs that are known to by the customers, but they're not necessarily voiced by the customers. And then third, what you're going to do is you're going to look at and try to understand what the delighters are. Now, we actually just had our CEO, Tom Manning, talk about all three of these things. I was kind of excited to hear him talk about these things. Because understanding the likely satisfiers, the dissatisfiers, and the delighters, this is how you come up with some of those case studies that I just mentioned moments ago. This is how you come up with an Apple iPhone. This is how you come up with a Netflix. This is how you come up with an Amazon. What does that mean? Well, how do you obtain these things? Well, to understand what the likely satisfiers are, you're going to use things like surveys. You're going to use things like interviews, focus groups. You're going to use things and approaches like market research, and you're going to use competitor ads. For likely dissatisfiers, you're going to use one-on-one interviews. You're going to use industry standards, industry regulations. You're going to use publicly available recall data, and you're also going to use competitor ads as well. And then for delighters, you're going to use structured and planned focus groups. You're going to observe your customers. You're going to utilize something that is called painstorming. I'm going to get into that in just a moment. And you're going to use publicly available recall data and competitor ads. So I want to talk about the painstorming. And by the way, this should say innovation, so I apologize for that. But I want to talk about the painstorming. I was in Florida giving a similar conversation. I ran into and was introduced to someone at a company called Illinois Tours, called ITW. And what they do at ITW is they have an innovation approach, which I'm hoping that we can bring here at D&B. And their approach is they actually go to their customers and they have conversations about what are the things that are troubling you? What are the things that are costing you the most money? Where are you spending all of your time? And by having those conversations, they call it painstorming. They also observe their customer. But when they get this information, what they do is they say, how long has this been a problem? How many people are affected? How much is this costing you each year? And then what they do when they do with that information, they take that information and then they start saying, hey, is this a market that we're strong in, that we can compete in, that we can actually produce a product? And this is a $53 billion firm, by the way. So to put it in perspective, D&B, I think, is about a $2 billion firm. This is a $53 billion firm. And what she shared with me was this was their approach, and this is how they actually deliver innovation. Then I was fortunate enough, because we have a friendship now, I actually just had a conversation with her, and I was saying, what kind of questions are you asking, and how often are you meeting, and all these things? And the bottom line is, they have a very structured approach on how they go about interfacing with their customers so they can produce the innovation. But what are they doing? They're doing painstorming. They're observing their customers, and they're having structured and planned focus groups. So again, these are the approaches. This is how you understand what value is, and this is how you get to the voice of the customer. All of these things, from a Lean Six Sigma perspective, you're going to take these tools that I mentioned earlier, critical to quality, quality function deployment, TRIZ, Q, fracas. We're going to take these things, we utilize tools and analysis to make sure that all of these inputs are properly fed into an approach that takes this data, synthesizes this into actionable items, things that the company can actually deliver on. And then we're going to prioritize those things, and we're going to put this into some sort of a digestible component where we can actually produce innovation. Now, the customer experience. For many people and many companies focus on the actual product attributes. There's a reason for that. Product attributes are what's advertised on television. Product attributes are what we compare one product to the next. However, but there's more to just the customer experience than just product attributes. If you really think about it, the customer experience, there's a step for every product or service, and there's several steps actually. The customers don't simply experience your product, they're actually experiencing quite a bit more. If we look at it and think of this from a content perspective, you have engagement, which is which platform is the customer going to take our content? When are they going to take this content? How are they going to take this content? From a delivery perspective, how easy is it for the customer to actually receive this product or service? The product is the product itself, that will be the content. But the interface is we're asking how can we make the interface the easiest while also delivering the functionality required. And then, of course, from a performance perspective, how quickly are we getting and delivering this data, this content to the consumer? And then finally, how are we incorporating feedback? And this is really huge. How are we incorporating some sort of communication and feedback mechanism so that we can continually improve our offering? Each step of the overall process requires optimization. I want to emphasize this. This can't be emphasized enough. The entire customer experience has to be maximized, not just the product. So if you want to understand why some companies are successful and some are not, it's because they're focusing on just this, and they've completely lost sight that the entire customer experience is the product. And that the entire customer experience is what needs to be maximized. The entire customer experience, as I said before, it's a process. Maximize the process, maximize the customer experience. Design for Six Sigma, maximize the process for new products and new services.